Hi, I'm Photon. I just wanted to wish you a happy Easter before we continue on tutorial 22.
Okay, so this is where we were. By the way, as always, there's a zip file of all these files so that you don't have to download them all separately. Also, I've uploaded a music directory containing ProTracker programs and ProTracker instruments. So go ahead and download and install that. But in this tutorial, we're not quite there yet with the music. So in this tutorial, we'll do the scroller bouncing. And there it is, the ugly smiling person reminding me of myself. We'll get to that in some other tutorial. For now, we're going to make the scroller bounce. So what happens if I change this, the plot Y position? Well, that makes it plot lower down on the screen, but it seems the scroll routine still scrolls on fixed. Yeah, here it is. You should make that dynamic. So we've just moved it down 10 pixels. I think it looks pretty good there. I want some space below it. So that's it. That's how you move this fixed scrolling area and fixed plot vertically. Now to do this dynamically, to do the bounce, we're going to do a standard vertical scrolling of a screen buffer, which is to change tell the copper to point into the screen buffer at various Y positions. So if you take a mental picture of where the scroller is right now, we're going to change the copper so that we're going to move the scroller upwards with a minimum of effort. You can do this with two modulo changes, two weights and a modulo change of both modulos for each. But it can be a pain to calculate it and get it right, so it's more pedagogical to do it with screen pointers, I think. So screen bitplane pointers. There we go, that's where we set it. And this just stupidly points to the very first byte of the screen buffer. So what we need to do there is I'm gonna add, and actually I need the long word for this, not necessarily since it's an address register, but just to make it look proper, because these values can get larger than 64K, that's why. So we have 3 bit planes on, and we're going to add, well, why not add plot Y to that? That's how many lines, this variable here, screen bit plane, is the number of bytes for each bit plane of bitmap data, and we have 3 bit planes on, so this then becomes the number of bytes to add to get to the next, to add 1 line to the screen pointer, and we add this many lines to the source pointer there, and that should move the scroller up to the very top of the screen buffer, and it does. And we can also see that when we're at the top there, we've put the scroller at Y position 110. That means the scroller ends at 129. And below the scroller currently is a lot of lines of buffer data, and even more lines of visible display window before we hit the bottom there. So that's why it's showing showing us something outside the screen buffer, the buggy bit at the bottom left. So we need to not go that high with the Y position, or we could just add a little to the screen buffer to allow that. But I will not do that because I've already decided that it will bounce about half of the black area in height. So how do we make a bounce? How do we make this dynamic? First of all, well, we create a variable and we multiply it by some value here, and that value should be the number of bytes per line of the screen buffer. So we move, why not call it bounce Y? And we add the 0 to a 0. So that's it. And then we can just go to the data section and declare it. We need a bounce of Y with the current Y position. We might not need that. We might be able to remove this later, but let's say we find the top position, which top position is apt for this. There was an extraneous asterisk there. So this is the scroller now, moved up 50 pixels from its bottommost position, where it should start bouncing up again. So is that about right, or should we have some more height to it? I think that's actually a little bit too much. So if we change that to 48 something. Okay, that's good. So what's the next step here? Well, we need some type of curve, some kind of bounce curve, right? There are several approaches to this, and some coders will silently scream sine waves, sine tables in their head. And absolutely, you can use a sine table from 0 to 180 degrees, and then you'd get a nice bounce. You could also use any parabolic curve. You could use a second degree curve of any kind. You could even use a 1 through x curve, inverted and mirrored. There are various ways of generating these smoothly decelerating values, and that's the cue for me to tell you about acceleration, because I thought I'd use a I mean, we could declare a bound. I can show you the fixed way of doing it. You could create a bounce table, and you could go with 0, 10, 8, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 2, 1, 1, 0, 0, something like that. And of course that's the wrong way around, right? It should be 10, 10 plus 8, 10 plus 8 plus 6, and so on, until you reach 48. So if you want, you could start at 48, 47, 46, 44, 41. I'm adding 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 10, 13, 20, and so on, accelerating values to this top value. But one problem with that is that it's hard to get it smooth writing the values manually, and it's a bit cumbersome to generate a sine table. You can do it with an ordinary calculator. So, and also you couldn't match up the period properly. If you wanted, the period is the length of the bounce table, simply, where it starts to repeat from the start again. So that would be that when we've reached the bottom of that parabolic curve and started bouncing up again, that would be the joint between two periods of the curve. This will come back in some sound information tutorials later, maybe. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a bounce y variable. We're going to have a bounce y speed variable, and we're going to later add another variable here, but we can declare it. I'm going to set it to 0 for the time being. I'm going to reset this to 0. And you know what? I'm going to declare, I'm going to invert the coordinates because that will suit us better, I think, will it? I'm not sure yet. Anyway, we have a bounce y position that we're already using. We have a bounce y speed variable that we'll use right now. And what we're going to do is, before we create the final pointer value here, we're going to simply add bounce y speed to that speed, and we're going to compare it to 48. And if it's lower than that, it's not going to bounce. And you should spell out your labels to make them more readable. And if that happens, we negate the bounce y speed. And we want to make sure we save the bounce y value back. And you know, good coders will look at this and cringe and say it's horribly unoptimized. You'd put some load some effective address, this address for example, into A2, and then you would use A2 plus and a lot of different addressing modes. Anyway, I'm not going to get too much into detail about that. We're going to save this as tutorial 22 and give it a go, and it should give a deja vu feeling, I think. Or it would be if it had worked. So what's wrong with this? I'm going to check the values here. Bounce y. Still on 1. What's happened here? It's added to it once. Oh yeah, of course. We're going to move it each frame now. So we're in the init loop here. So we need to move this into a subroutine. Why not? And call that subroutine something like bounce scroller. And I hope I'm still recording. I accidentally pressed the F9 key there. So anyway, this is our little subroutine there, and that should well, we need to call it in the main loop as well, don't we? So I'm actually going to do that before I start splitting any stuff here, and before I start waiting for some fixed position. So I guess I'm going to put it at the start, PSR. After all, it only takes like half a scan line to execute. Bounce, scroller, that's it. Well, that's interesting. There's some register that is not initialized. I'm gonna check bounce Y, so it hasn't gone. It has. Okay, so it's something is wrong with the values here. Bounce scroller. Here we go. After the first iteration, it will be. Hang on. We didn't move the copper spike pointer poke thingies from the init routine. Or I didn't. You probably did, because you're better coders than I am. So, where was it? Probably this down, huh? What do you think? Thank God for comments. Otherwise we'd have to use our brain, and we wouldn't want that now, would we? There you go. And we get a little blink at the bottom, but we're not going to be concerned about that right now. Probably need to set this to 48 when it's bouncing. Hang on. What the hell? Probably we should do the check before that. Well, I don't. It's not important at this stage. So anyway, gonna move that back. So that wasn't very bouncy, was it? It moves just like the copper bar up there. So we need to accelerate this, and that's what we do here then. So what we should do is to modify the speed value before adding it to the Y value. And we do that simply by adding bounds Y accel to bounds Y speed. And there should be no bounce checks needed for this as we do for the Y position. All we care about is to reflect the speed vector and the acceleration vector when we hit the bottom there. So that's what we're going to do. So bounce Y accel. What the hell? Undefined symbol. I'm totally stumped here. Probably getting blind in my old age. Some nicotine might help me. Or not. Separate these to see which one is the offending one. That works fine. That is super weird. Add this to that. Okay. Gonna do it in 2 instructions then. Sorry if I'm sounding stressed. I'm trying to get this tutorial out while it's still Easter, right? So that's interesting. So probably what happens is it accelerates to probably, well, we could check the values. As you can see, the speed value far exceeds the 48 maximum height that we've set. So, sorry. And we should not negate this, I think. Well, sort of. We got some sort of bounds there. So what's happening here? We're increasing the values from 0 up, which puts the 0 point at the top, which means that's where it's landing, so to speak. So we need to flip it somehow. So what happens here is that we have a also we should have a start value of the speed of 0. And the rest is fine, so that when we what this will do is we will start at y position 0. It will start to accelerate, which means fall. And then it will hit 0, and then it will reflect the values, the speed I should say, and the acceleration, the gravity if you wish, is still downwards, so that's correct. Only the speed will now be negative, which means that, hang on, so that probably that means we should start at, how about we make a proper, mathematically proper coordinate system here, where the y-axis is pointing upwards, so that we start at the top position and we let it fall downwards, and no, that should still be 0, but the acceleration should be downwards, right? So that will make it go from 48, start falling and accelerating. This, in other words, the speed which gets this value added to it will decrease more and more, so that after the first iteration it will be -1, after the second one it will be -2, after the third one it will be -3, and so on. So the speed will increase downwards. Now we have the top of the curve at 48 instead of 0. I was working in screen coordinates before, which are from the top downwards. So now we should no longer compare to 48, but to 0, and there's a shortcut for this. Instead of comparing to 0, after all, this could turn negative, and then this compare instruction would not work, because it only checks unsigned numbers. So this add instruction sets the condition code flags, so-called, in the CPU, and when we pass below 0, there will be a minus flag or negative flag set, so that we can check if it's minus, if it's below 0, and if it's 0 or above, then it should not bounce. If you want to check for 0 as well, you can type this condition code. Depends on what you want to do. I'm gonna go with this, and then when the y speed has decreased to say -10 and we are below the bounce position at the bottom, we negate this -10 or something to become +10, and then the acceleration, which is -1, will be continued to be added to this value, so that it decreases from 10 to 9 to 0 to -1 to -10 again, and then it's ready for a bounce. Something like that will take place. Since we have inverted this, it will bounce upwards. So to fix this, once we've saved the value back to memory, we can negate it, and we can add 48 to it, add the height of the curve. So let's see how that fares. And for all my talk, it's still not negated properly. 48 down to that. What the hell? Also, it's losing momentum, so we need to set some fixed value at to the speed to refuel this gravity. It's normal that things fall to the ground and bounce less and less, but in this case we do not want that. And so why is this position? Now let's check what the value is. It's negative. That's a clue. Of course it should not be negative. With a start value of 48 and a bounce boundary of 0, it should of course never become less than 0, and I thought we'd fix that with... There's always a bit of adjustment on these dynamic ways of creating what is essentially extremely rudimentary physics. Let's see if it turns negative after the first bounce. There, it should not. And it's correct, so if we go from 48, accelerate towards 0, and I negate that and add 48 to it and multiply it and add it to the goddamn screen pointer, why is it still inverted? Because this value should be between 0 and 48, or 48 and downwards to 0. When we negate it, it should be between 0 and -48, and when we add 48 to it, it should be between 0 and 48 again. Sometimes you just... well, that's pretty good. I think that we need to do some manual work here, in that we should save this to find out what it is at the intersection. I'm going to create a debug variable here. I'm going to find out when it's bounced once, I should say, what the value is. And I have to be quick here. That's -6, that's what it is. So, and that's correct. So what we should do here is set some fixed value, clear to 0, and the acceleration stays the same. I don't know if this will keep it bouncing to the same height, but we'll see. Might be that it bounces high the first time. Yeah, that did it. But the height is lacking, isn't it? So the bounce height is not, seems to me, 48. So why is that? How about we have a known start value of, say, instead of setting the maximum height of the curve, well, god damn it, it should work. Let's see if we can get a higher bounce from this. Seems so. Now it's starting to look like something. We're still too high up, I think. That's because we add a little bit too much to it there. And that puts us with the bottom at the desired position. And in so that's the bounce effect for now. We're gonna adapt this to the music in the next tutorials, so see you then.
22, 22.